to HTML class, class 1 of the little web development series that I have going on this month. Each class is going to be the same Friday time from now until the end of the month. So today is HTML, which is the most basic building block of any and all websites on the web. And then next week we'll do CSS, which is adding, style and paint to websites and things like that, layout. Then next week will be JavaScript, which will be kind of like the complicated one. It's like an actual programming language. We'll be, coding in how to do things when you click on buttons and stuff on websites, and how to update websites based on how you behave with the website, that kind of thing. And then the last class, I think I called it Make a Website. I have a couple things planned out with that just to kind of wrap it up and put it all in one final project, but we'll see how that goes. And we might even just kind of leave it open-ended depending on how this goes. So let's just get into Replit to begin with, get it all set up, and then we can talk about HTML itself. So Replit, it's a free, what's called an IDE. It's basically a type of application that you can use to write code, just like Microsoft Excel used to build and analyze spreadsheets. An IDE is what you use to do coding in, and you can do any type of coding in IDEs. And we'll see in Replit in a second that you can handle almost any language, but we'll be focused on the HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. And not only can we write code, we can run code, and we can actually kind of like host websites in Replit. All the code that we build today will get a unique web address to what we make, and it'll actually be kind of immediately live. And anyone who goes to, the web address that we see at the top of these pages as we make them will be live and available on the web. So to make kind of a new project, a new website to put web pages on, I'm just on the home page of Replit, and you can just go ahead and up in the top left, go ahead and click on kind of that options button. And then we just want to use this create button to make a new project to put all this code. So go ahead and click that create button. You should see HTML, CSS, JS kind of at the top of this left-hand box, but if you don't see it, you can just type in HTML until you see this option. And this is just the type of code, this type of project that we'll be building. In the title spot, you can give it any title. This is just kind of like the name of the website. I'm going to call it web dev as in web development. This is ticked public. So like I said, this website will be public and available to anyone who comes to the page you have on Replit. So we'll go ahead and click create, and we'll be inside the IDE now, the application to actually kind of make the code, run the code, and see the website. So just to begin, we'll take a look at the tools and these kind of windows that we have, and then we'll actually talk about the HTML itself. On the left-hand side, we have this kind of files pane. And in this, we have 3 files that it just gives us. 2 of them we have nothing in. And as you may be able to guess by the file extension, .css and .js, these will be what we could put CSS and JavaScript code into, but they don't give us any by default. It's blank, and we can just leave them blank. We don't need them to make a website. But what we do have is something called an index.html file, kind of kept on this website. And when we click on it, we can see the second kind of window pane that's accessible to us. And this is the contents of this file. Just like if you had a document on the desktop and you clicked it open and open Microsoft, this is the same thing. This is an actual file. And then this is the contents of that file. And it's just a text file, basically. That's what HTML is. Next up at the top, we have this run button. And if we go ahead and click that, we can see the last main box that we'll look at today. And this is a little window that's just going to show us what the website that we make, the web page, what it actually looks like as we add in content and style it up with some HTML code. So right now, this is just kind of the basic HTML, which we might not know what it means yet. But this is kind of all that you need. And you even need like less than half of this to even make the most basic HTML page. You basically just need line 1, line 2, and then you can just have a bit of text. And we can see that this is kind of text that's also on the web page, and it's in black. And the rest of it is kind of like blue and violet and yellow. And we can see that's probably HTML code that's doing something because we don't see that on the web page itself. If we use this open in a new tab button, we can see this is what my website actually looks like. If you type this in on your own laptop, webdev.myname.repl.co, you would be able to see my website, and this is all you can see on it, this little bit of text. And then this last window on this bottom side, the console and the shell. The console has to do with JavaScript, and it's kind of optional. And the shell has to do, it's kind of redundant, and we won't get into what it actually is. So if you want to save space, you can put the mouse on top of it, get this little mouse icon, and just kind of fold it away and set up this page as you want, so you can see what you want. So now that we got the tool ready that we'll be using today, let me just go back to my slides. So again, this is all on the slides. I'm following my handout as I go on my desk. So at home tonight, you can review this all. I think it's pretty detailed as we go along. So let's take a step back and talk about like what an actual web page is. So we need a couple things to build a website. In a website, it's just multiple web pages. We need something like Google Chrome, Edge, Mozilla Firefox, just a browser application. And that basically is a tool that you type in a web address up at the top, and then it basically fetches that website so you can access it and see it. So to access it, we all know we just type that web address up into the top. And then kind of step 2 that it does is it displays the files that it gets back. And if you didn't know that previously, then yes, a website is basically just text files like this. It's just all plain text basically. And if you have like images and videos, you might have image and video files, but it's all spelled out in text. The shape of things, backgrounds, colorings, all that, it's just spelled out with text, HTML code. So we use something like Google Chrome to get a website, and then it basically downloads something like a batch of files like we see on the left-hand side. Obviously, the one we have right now is quite simple, but that's essentially what it does. Let me blow this up. So let's talk about what each of these languages is as we go through today and the rest of the web development classes if you continue on. So HTML is its own language. It's all those coding symbols that we just saw and we'll do today. And what it is it's kind of the plain text content of a website. So any of the text that you see on a website, like we can see on my website now, it's just this hello statement. This is all HTML really is. It's kind of just that text content, and it kind of describes meaning of what that text is. And that's opposed to the second language, which is almost always conjoined with HTML, which is CSS, aka like styling. So right now, this is just plain black text, black on white, so that's HTML. If we go to like an actual website, like the library website, most of this, the fact that it looks like what we think of as an actual website, is also CSS added in. So the fact that this little section is bold font, the fact that it's in blue, the fact that we have these like yellow lines dividing sections, how long that yellow line is, the fact that we have like kind of a list with icons, like the shape of this box and how, the fact that this is in the middle, all that kind of style and paint is CSS itself. If we took out all the CSS of this page, it would just be basically this text up at the top, all of this text, and it would just look kind of like this page. It would just all be black and white. So that's what CSS does. So until we get to CSS, we'll be looking at a lot of, plain black and white web pages. until we get to that. And then lastly, JavaScript, if we go back to this website. So CSS is all the stylings, and we can think of it as kind of like the adjectives to HTML's nouns, HTML's content. But JavaScript is kind of like actions and behaving based on input. So if like we take a look at this box and I click this X, that vanishes. That's a JavaScript functionality. When I click this one, that one does the same thing. When I like toggle these boxes, that's JavaScript because it's kind of like an action that's doing something based on how I click. That's JavaScript. And then this lastly, I just want to explain a static and a dynamic website. A static website is when everybody sees the same content. Like this website is essentially a static website. You don't log into it like you would, like Facebook. Anyone who comes to this website gets the same files and data back. But a dynamic website, something with like a back end and like a database, that's something like Facebook and social medias and like Amazon. And depending on who logs in, when you go in, what the situation is, you get specific web pages with specific data to you. That's a dynamic website. So obviously we'll be making a kind of like a static website in these classes. Okay, so what is HTML itself? Well, this is what HTML is, just an abbreviation, HTML. L is obvious, it's obviously a language, and we'll see on Replit all that code that we saw, that's a language. Obviously it's just text, it's plain text. And I just want to mention now, even though we see like blue and yellow and black and a little bit of gray, that's just something the IDE is doing to kind of highlight specific sections of text. All the blue stuff is kind of the same type of thing, although all of the yellow stuff is kind of the same type of thing. HTML really is just all, it's just plain text. It's just black on white, like I said. This is just a little fancy styling that the website is doing to just visually help us. So it's a text language. And then the most crucial thing, I think, is the middle bit. What is the M? Well, it's a markup language. And that means basically that it's a language which uses metadata to annotate and describe the actual content of a document. So if we take a look at this little image, I'll blow it up again, we can kind of see in the middle, this is kind of like a little abstracted web page. We can't see the text, but we can see like a heading, an image, little text, a list at the bottom of the web page. And then pointing to it is the HTML code that would kind of write those sections. So HTML is two things. It's content. So in this, you would have like page title heading. That would be like on the web page itself. That's the actual heading. You would have like the actual subtitle. You would have the text of a paragraph, all this kind of grayed out font. And then the HTML, what we'll now call tags, is these kind of bookends that surround each bit of content and basically say what that bit of content is. Because we have to spell everything out in just plain text, we can't just use a blue sentence if we want that sentence to be blue. We kind of have to say, oh, we need to begin writing in blue font. What content is in blue font? And then let's have a bookend saying we'll stop doing that blue font now. And the same thing with everything, saying this is a paragraph beginning now, this is its content, and then this little bit of code says that content is ending, and the next thing, maybe not a paragraph. Tags that say something is a link, then this is like the text link that you actually click on, and then that link is closed by a closing tag. So this is essentially all that HTML looks like. It's just content kind of bookended on both sides by some metadata, these tags / elements, which we'll get into now, which say basically what that type of content is. Is it a heading? Is it a link? Is it a button? Is it an item of a list? All that kind of stuff. And so if we go to something like this, so this might be something we all do when we like write emails, we write documents, we usually just use these kind of buttons to apply styling. You know, if we want to make something italic, we just select it and then click italic. But we can't do this with plain text, which is only black on white, basically. So this is something that we might be used to doing, just clicking like that. But if I switch to the HTML of what we just saw, we can see I have the same content. I have my page heading, and I had my page heading. But now we see the hidden HTML tags. It's something called an H1, and it's defining when it begins and when it ends. And the same thing with this subtitle, these italics and these bolds and this link. So that's going to get us most of the way with HTML, just using this metadata. Okay, let's zoom back out. Oops. Oh, and by the way, while I just fiddle, if you guys have any questions as I'm going, want me to slow down, explain something, go ahead and chime in or use the chat as you will when it comes up. You don't have to wait till the end. Okay, so back in Replit itself, today we'll be focusing on index.html. It's called index.html just by convention. That basically means the home page of a website or the homepage of a website. And this is kind of the base code, kind of the minimum. And even most of this is not technically needed, just to generate a basic HTML page. For now, we can skip most of this stuff at the top. So what I'm going to do is, if you put the mouse to the left of this, you see these little minus boxes. And if you just click that, that's going to kind of collapse that out of view. So if you want to do that, you can.
Do what, sorry?
Yeah. So I was just collapsing this little chunk of code. So if you go next to head and you put the mouse to the left of it, you should see a little box with a minus sign. And if you just click that, that just kind of toggles hiding that little bit of code.
Okay.
You don't have to do that, it's just convenience. Okay. So again, let's talk about these tags and elements. So an HTML element is like a single discrete block of HTML. And that means an open tag, like the text content that you would see on the page itself, and something like a closed tag. And as we can see from this example, the tags themselves obviously don't show up on the finished web page. When we show it, we only see this little bit of text. All the non-black font is kind of just element tags themselves. And they just give, in this case, like Google Chrome, some information kind of behind the scenes. But all this stuff doesn't show up on the web page too, obviously. So an element is anything. An element is a block of HTML. So we'll take a look at this one as an example. So if I click on body, this is one HTML tag. It's one of the elements that you can use. If I click on it, you can see it automatically highlights a second thing that also says body. And this is a classic example of an HTML element. All elements, these tags, they kind of begin and close with these kind of arrow symbols. So I open it like this, I type the name of my tag, and then I close it. And then I would have my content. And then I also have to have a closing tag to say, this is when this type of content, the metadata I'm giving it, is finishing. So you would be like body, this content is the body, and then you would do slash body. And that means that this is the close of this. This is one chunk called an HTML element. And that's what an element is. An element is this whole thing. And then a tag is a component of the element. So this is the element, this is a tag, this is a tag, and this is the open tag, and this is the close tag. So tags and contents make up the element as a whole like that. So now we can just go ahead and begin writing some HTML just to see how it kind of goes and get the feel of, you know, using all this funny syntax. I'm going to go ahead and delete this little sample line that we just made. And then I can put as much white space as I want. I'm just going to open up some space. And then we'll just see, we won't even use the HTML tags. We'll just put in some content. So we won't wrap it in tags. So I'm just going to say hello to see how that shows up on the website. And when I click run at the top, we can see I do get it on my website. But it kind of looks funny. I put it on its own line. This is on the same line like this. I can see if I put a couple lines in between and update the website with this run button up at the top, it's still going to show it on the same line. And that's because HTML, it kind of takes this text and it only styles it on the finished website, on the finished web page, based on these element tags that you wrap things in with. So to do something like a new line, we'll use like the most common HTML tag that is. And what we can do is open a tag with the arrow symbol. I'm going to type a P, and the name of this tag is just P. And we can see Replit gives me a little drop down, and P is one of them. And if I click on the little info button, it just says the P element is a paragraph. So I can do that. I'm going to use the close arrow to say this is my open tag. And now I can type my content. So I'm just going to type 1. And now I want to finish this paragraph. So I can do open/P and then close like this. And now I've just made an HTML element, open tag, content, close tag. And I can see if I click on my open P, Replit's going to automatically find the close of that tag. So it's pretty handy. And now when we click run, we can see these two still show up on the same line. But this one, because I defined it as a paragraph, and that's kind of HTML knows it's its own thing, it's going to put it on its own line. It's just a built-in way that a P tag is displayed. This is how it's going to come up. And I could even, if I want, back this all the way up to be on the same line as hello. But when I run it, it's still going to say, oh, this is the beginning of a P tag, so I'm going to drop it to a new line. So we can see how these tags begin to modify what shows up on the website, even though this doesn't look, like what would come out on this left-hand side. And then we can do just a second one. I'm going to open a second P tag, and then I'm going to close it immediately, just as a good practice, because we always want to close the tag that we open. If we don't close them, we could have some bugs. So I'm just going to open it and close it, and then back up and put in my content. And then I'm just going to say 1, 2. I can click that. We can see, even though I have it on the same line in the HTML file, since each one is in its own P element, it's still going to come out on 2 lines. And we can see the difference between these on 2 lines, but they show up on 1 line because we didn't use HTML elements. In these two, I put on the same line, but because I'm using HTML elements, they jump to their own line, each like this. We'll just go on with a little bit of practice with a couple new elements and talk about some new things. So we'll just jump down the line. And I'm just going to do a couple P tags again. So open some P tags. I now have a paragraph element. And I'm just going to say, this is some bold text. And now what we can do is we can kind of stack HTML tags. So we'll kind of nest them. So what we need next is a B tag, as in bold. So I'm just going to put it inside the P tag like this. So I'm saying begin a P tag, and we can think of elements as kind of boxes. So I'm going to say make a paragraph box. And inside of that, I'm going to put a second box actually called a bold box. And then inside of that sub box, I'm going to put this content. And then I'm going to close the inside box and then close the outside box like this. I can go ahead and run that. And now we can see one of the functions of the bold tag, as the name suggests, is to affect the text so it's bold, just like that. And then we can do the same thing with some italic text, just to keep practicing. This is some italic text. And then this time I'm going to nest it inside this second P tag. but I don't have to nest them side by side. If I just want to italicize italic, I can just do that like this. I'm going to open my tag to the left of the text and then close it following when I want that elements effect to stop. So now if I run this, we can see two things. One, I got my italic text to show up because I have italic wrapped in the I tag, which means italics. But we can see an unexpected thing. I now have both sentences in bold. And the reason that is because, like we said, this isn't like, I close that page. But this isn't like, you know, when you open Microsoft and you just select something and then click the bold button to make it bold. We have to specify in text when something opens and then when something closes. And as you can see with this, I clicked on my B, that's my open tag, meaning bold from now on until I tell you to stop. But it's not showing me, it's not highlighting, like when I click this P, it highlights when it ends. When I click this B, it doesn't find its close tag. And that's because what I've done is I put in a little typo intentionally. And we can see I have an open B tag when I should have a close B tag. So I should have it like this, but I have it like this at the moment. So as I update my website, it stays like this. And what's happening is I said, from now on, make this content bold until I tell you to stop, until you find that close tag. But I didn't give it any close tag. In fact, I just basically said again, okay, you've been bolding from now on, but I'm telling you, because I'm giving you an open B tag, to bold from now on again. So that's why this kind of bold effect spills basically until the end of the document because it has no close tag. So what I can do is I can just close that like this, and then I fix it up and just like that. And then I can just do, this is some plain text, one last one. And just check that to see that I don't have anything spilling. Just 1 second. Yeah, so we always want to check that we close tags the way we should. Sometimes it'll be a bad kind of run on like we just saw, but sometimes it'll actually, it won't affect anything. You shouldn't have these typos, but it won't affect anything. If we do something like instead of the B tag, we take out this close P tag, so that basically this is opening, but then we don't close it. If we run the page, we actually don't see any kind of mistakes on the page. It looks like we kind of expected it to. So depending on what kind of mistake, what the specific code is, you could see the website kind of look funny. And sometimes it'll kind of come out okay anyway. At no point will, it's difficult to actually, like, you can't really crash a website. It's just gonna look awful if you put too many mistakes in it, but you can't really like crash a website like you could make a mistake in like the Python language or like some backend language and have the whole thing just not run. So, so you just have to watch out because it will display something. You just have to catch that it didn't do what you wanted like that. A couple last things to mention just while we do these introductions. Just like kind of some HTML conventions. Look at the way you write it and style it. We can see the kind of each element that is kind of nested in a second element. It's always kind of indented from that to say this is a sub element of P, because as we can see now, with something like this simple element, we have an open tag, content, which is just plain text, and then a close tag. The content of some elements can be subsequent elements. You can have elements within elements within elements, and then all the way down a couple levels, then you could have just the kind of plain text at the end. So while this isn't needed, if I outdent that, then run the thing, it's still going to show up fine. It's just convention, and it's just a visual convenience to help you see what's going on, to kind of, when you put an element within a second element, to indent it like this, just so you can kind of see it on the page like that. And then one last thing I want to mention as we talk about kind of basic HTML elements, we got the P tag. The B tag is in bold and the I as in italic is, this is an HTML element, but it's unique in the way that it does stuff. So if I do this, and what I've done is I've done the little open arrow, exclamation point, hyphen, hyphen, anything I want, any little message, and then hyphen, hyphen, close. If I run this, we can see it doesn't show up on my website. And we can see it looks a little funny. It's grayed out and italicized just visually on the page. This is what's called an HTML comment. And it's something that is not going to show up on the website. And it's also something that's not really coding anything. It's not saying something is happening. This is kind of just like a post-it note in my code, basically just a message to myself. It's not affecting anything. It's not going to be visible in the end, as we can see. So as you go along, if you want, you can take notes this way using the comment tag. So you can put them any place you want, and anything in between the opening and the close of this won't be shown as code, and it won't be shown as content. So I can say, like, this is a p tag paragraph like that, and then it's still not going to show up. And then
So,
yeah.
Sorry, you said hyphen and not a dash. Okay, so that's probably the mistake I made.
Yeah, it's like we'll take the minus symbol next to the plus equals. Yeah, I don't know what you want.
Minus symbol. That's okay.
Yeah. And then you can also see when I open it, since I haven't closed it yet, it's basically saying anything past this will be commented out. That's what it's called. So you can actually use this to kind of omit code. So if I like do this, instead of having just a message inside, I just have a piece of code that I don't want to show on the website, but I kind of want to save onto it. So I'm kind of hiding it. If I run the code now, we can see that 2 vanished because I basically said, kind of don't pay attention to this right now. It's in a comment like this. So you can use comments to take notes, to kind of hide content as you will.
Matt, can you make the screen a little larger?
Oh yeah, let me.
Too small. Okay, thanks.
Yeah, I apologize. My own laptop is quite small. I have like a mini, so it's okay. Let's hop back to the slideshow. No, thank you. Okay, so we'll take a quick step back and talk about like HTML as a whole again, and why we can't just have content on a page. Why can't we just type the text? Why do we need to wrap it in these tags and things? Well, one is to affect these styles that we want. If we want something to be a paragraph, we put it in a P tag. If we want it to be bold, we can put it in a B tag. But there's a lot of reasons beyond this. And that's why you should kind of pay attention to how you use these tags. The whole of HTML is all kind of this hidden metadata that you kind of wrap content in. As we can see, all the cool stuff, CSS, painting, layouts and things, all the fun stuff, that's in CSS. So the main job and kind of the only job of HTML is to kind of encode this metadata. So if we take a look at this little image on the screen now, we can see each box we can think of as just kind of an abstraction of a web page. On the left, we have what looks like we could guess that it's an HTML tag because it has the open close arrows. This is called a div tag. And just so we know, a div tag, just like a P tag and a B tag, a div tag basically is one of the only HTML elements that really has no meaning. A P tag means a paragraph, an H1 means like a heading level 1. An A tag means like a web link. We'll see those at the end of today. But a div kind of just means this is kind of a blank, any way you want to use it element. If we imagine it like as an analogy, if you need to move and you need to pack up the house, it'd be quite difficult if you got the same type of box to put everything into, the same size, the same shape, and you didn't label them. This is kind of what this website looks like to things like Google when it needs to like index and make sense of websites. This is kind of what a website would look to without HTML's metadata, to something like accessibility tools when Someone who's blind might depend on you using explicit HTML to say, oh, you can quickly jump to this navigation section. You can quickly jump to this main text without the accessibility tool having to read out every single line in the website. So that's kind of the point of HTML metadata, to kind of say what's what, so you can do a lot of like automation and cool stuff with it and help make sense of it. So if we think of this as a house that moved with everything in the same box without labels, it's going to be quite difficult to unpack that, aka Google grabbing that website and displaying it, indexing it, accessibility tools using it. While on this hand, even without seeing the actual content, we could see we have like a heading, we have a little post, maybe an image with like a table and a little bit of some foot information. So just looking at this without even the actual content, we can kind of almost see at a glance, this looks something like a blog post. If I wanted to jump to the image with like an accessibility tool, I just say, oh, go find this HTML element. If I want to jump up to the navigation so I can jump to a different page, if I'm blind and I'm using these tools, I can just say, oh, go find that heading tag using that metadata. And this is like if you moved houses and you had specific things in specific boxes, you have the clothes in the big box that you can hang things from, and you label it, you have the dog goes in the dog crate. Kind of everything makes sense and it's easy to pack away and unpack and use once you want to access it. So that's kind of the whole point of HTML and its semantics in this metadata, supplying meaning so all types of tools can make sense of it and be quick and efficient about it. So let's go ahead. Just 1 second. We'll go ahead and jump back into doing some new HTML, getting used to it, writing elements and nesting them and all that. So if we go back to this page, what we can do, I'm just going to hide this a little bit so we can see both. We'll just kind of set this up as if it's going to be an actual website. It might take away this content that we had. You can keep it if you want, so you can go back and practice. I'm just going to empty out my web page again. And now I'm going to begin to do stuff like put a heading at the top of the website and things like that. So I'm going to begin with something called an H1. And we can see Replit is saying H1 is just kind of a top level heading. It's the heading of some section. I'm going to close it as soon as I open it. And I'm just going to put my title in it. Development. This. And when I run this page, we can see just the content pops up. The H1 itself doesn't show on, but it does describe what it is. So we can see now the website knows this is kind of a main heading. It's heading level 1. And that's why it's kind of in bold in that font size. This along with like the P tag and things that we've seen, I'm showing you all the most common elements. Next, I want to mention something called empty elements. It's only a few uncommon ones. And what an empty element basically is I'm going to show 2 examples and then we'll see why we call them empty. Let me do this. So we can see, and I'm going to comment in what each one is. This element means a line break. And that's why we had this little bit of gap between the heading above it and what is below it, which is just kind of a line. And the reason we call them empty elements is because unlike most elements we've been doing when we have to open and then close them to describe exactly what's in that kind of box, we just kind of open them and we don't need to close them. And that's because they kind of have no content. This is just one single thing. And this is also just kind of one single thing. So we don't need to close them because nothing could go inside of them anyway. You can't put anything between like a single space like that. So these we just call empty elements, and it's the few that you don't have to have the closing tag. And also some ways that you might see these, you might see them sometimes like this. You kind of open them and then you just have a single space and then you kind of close them in the same tag. It's kind of like an open / close tag. Sometimes you'll see them like this. Sometimes you'll just see them as an open tag and then the close tag doesn't really exist. It's kind of okay to use both and you might see both. So that's what that means. Next, so we have a heading at the top, and let's go ahead and make something like kind of like a table of contents on this website. So I'm just going to add a couple elements. I'm going to use the OL element, and we can see that means a list of items, blah, blah, blah. I'm going to close it. And then I'm just going to put some space in the middle, because what this is, as we just said, is this is a list of items, and the O means it's kind of sequential. So this is going to give us like 1, 2, 3 in this list. And let's see what that looks like. So we'll indent, since this is going to be nested inside the list tag. I'm going to do LI, and that means a list item. And it's going to go ahead and close that immediately so I don't forget to do it. I'm going to put in my content. I'm going to do a second one. I'm just going to say CSS. And I'll just do one last one. And I'll call this JavaScript. And then when I update my website, we can see what it made. We have a list. It's sequential, so it automatically does 1, 2, 3 like this. So we don't have to count it out manually like this. So that's how we can do something like that. So that's a list, and LI is list item like that. And we'll keep adding to this table of contents. So what I'm actually going to do now is I want to make this like a kind of like the table of contents in a textbook. So I'm going to have like a unit and then like a subsection and then subpoints within that. So I'm actually going to nest a second element within this list item, and I'll call this, instead of H1, which I have up at the top, and which you should only have one of, you should only have one H1. That's like the main heading. I'm going to use an H2, so that's a little less high on the list, and you'll see it's less big in size. So I'm going to wrap it like this, and now we can see we have HTML in bold, a little bit less big than this because it's less on the priority list. We can see it looks a little funny. We have like a little 1 and then the HTML in bold. So what we can do is I'm actually going to wrap the whole list item in H2. I'm going to go like that. So I'm going to switch them. And now we can see what I'm doing is I'm saying, okay, I'm going to open up an H2 element. So I have like a box labeled H2. And then inside of that, I have the second box, which is list item. And since the whole list item is inside H2, it's also going to make kind of the bullet point, the 1 itself, kind of H2 visually like that. So just by switching that, we kind of wrapped different things to affect what we mean. We can do the same thing with this. And then lastly, we can just finish up with the JavaScript. And then we get that like that. And in a nutshell, this is like one of the main things of HTML, just kind of nesting these elements, just kind of knowing which type of element you need, and then just kind of putting boxes within boxes, kind of the way we've done like this. Lots of HTML elements exist, like H2s, lists, this line break, body, things like that. Those you just have to, I'll show a website in a couple minutes that you can kind of take a whole mini look at kind of all the elements that exist, and you'll know about them. But you can also just look them up. So it's less crucial to know exactly each element than to know in general what to do with HTML elements. Next, I'm going to go ahead and actually want to make, like I said, like a nested table of contents. So I want like sub bullet points below HTML. So what I can actually do is make a second list within this list, because I'm keeping with my indent. And I'm going to do, this time I'm going to do a UL. And I'll show what that means in a second. And I'm just going to put a blank list item in so that we can see. And we can see we have a little bit of bug now. My CSS and JavaScript got indented. That's just because I didn't close this the way that I should. So now we can see it went back to the way I want. And what UL is unordered list. So this is just bullet points. You don't have any sequence to it, 1, 2, 3 like that. So this is kind of the same thing as this, just bullet points and counting, if you will. And then within this, below HTML, I want something like this. And then maybe something like this. Just 2 items like that. And as we do this, we just kind of got to get used to the idea of nesting things, kind of building this HTML skeleton. In this, I could even wrap this in an H3, so it's kind of highlighted on the page like that. So we kind of go down the chain. And then we can actually even do one last list as we get to the actual bullet points that I want to make. Something like this. So now you can see we have something like this, quite a chained table of contents. And what I want to do now is just make put some actual content on the page. So I'm actually going to tell you guys about a good website to kind of continue on past this class, some good review, and then a lot of stuff that we don't do in this class. W3 Schools. I think it's actually .com, so I won't put that. And this is a good place to find a good lesson on HTML. Do that like that. And then we can add bullet points to all these, but just for the sake of time, we'll only do this one. And we'll go ahead and move on to the next point. The next element, which in this case is a link element. How do we make web links? So when you go to a web page, you click on something and then jump to that second page. So we want to make this a little bit clickable. We want to, let me go to that page so I can grab the link. W3 Schools, HTML. So I want to be able to click on a link and get to this page. You can see how much content it has, good at explaining HTML, and it has places to actually code on the website, give you a little snippet, tell you what to do, and then you can practice. But we want to link to this page. So I'm going to go ahead and copy this web address. And somehow we need to set up a link using a new element called a tag. A as an anchor tag. So it's basically saying this is linked to this different page. Let's take me to that page. So just for the sake of spacing and being able to see it, I'm kind of space this out like this. Typically, you leave it all on the same line, but just so we can see it, I'm going to go like this. And now we just said we need an A tag. So A is a link tag. If we update this, nothing happens. And that's because what we need now is something called an attribute. If you take a look at this little bit of code, what we'll be coding in a second, we can see we have an open tag, some content, and then a close tag. But inside the open tag, inside that, we have some additional kind of metadata. And that's what an attribute is. It's something about that element that we feed into it. It's not the content, it's kind of metadata about it. And that's the way we do it. We put it inside that open tag. And what we need is an href, and that's basically a hypertext reference, basically the web address that we want to go to. So to make an attribute inside the open tag, we'll just click into that. I'll give myself some space, and then I'm just going to type the name of my attribute that I want, in this case, href. And then you do an equal sign, and then I'm going to enclose the value that I give it in double quotations like this. Now, if I click play, now we can see something has happened. It looks exactly like a link like we want now. And if I go to this page, we can see it looks clickable, but it's obviously not doing anything yet because obviously we haven't told it which page we want to go to. So now we have the attribute equals value, and let's fill in the value. So I'm going to say this A tag, the clickable text of which is this. This is the website that I want to link it to. So now if I click update and go back to this page, now we can see we've made a successful link using those kind of attribute metadatas like this. And this one is specific to the A tag. This is how you make web links. In this attribute, you basically, with few exceptions, only see in the A tag. So A tag, let me put a little comment. A is equal to a web link, and href is equal to value, website to visit, just like that. So a second. So now we've seen elements, and we've seen what constitutes an element, a open tag and a close tag, and then the content inside. That content can be its own nested element, and then a second one, and then maybe some content at the end. And then one of the few last kind of really big things is these kind of attributes that you put inside of the open tag to give additional information about that that's not just text content on the page itself. So we'll play around with these a little bit to see what else we can do with attributes. Actually, I'm going to go ahead and just so we can see it easily on the page, I'm going to leave my table of contents and just put some stuff up at the top of the page. Oops. So we can see it like this. So I'm going to make a new web link. I'm going to give it an href, and I'll just use the same website. And then it's the clickable text that we see on the page. We'll use the same thing. We update this, we can see it at the top of the page. And this is exactly what we just did. But now with attributes, we can actually stack them. So instead of just having this one bit inside, we can actually come back inside the open tag, put a little space on it, and then we can add some additional information to kind of affect how this element behaves. So a second attribute might be something like this. Target equals underline blank. And now if I click play, and let me just go to this so we can see it. If I go to this old one that we made, it just opens the website. But if I go to this one, you'll notice what happened is I opened the website in a new tab, and I still have this old page open. So what we just did is use an attribute to make this open in a new tag using target attribute. So you can see we can just keep stacking these, play with them around. Let's add a couple new attributes to see what they can do. You can just actually copy and paste this to be easiest. Now what I want to do is we can do a lot of things with links. We don't just have to link to websites actually. So I'm going to take this away. And I'm going to say actually my email. If you've obviously been to websites, you know that you can sometimes click like a contact us link, and it'll kind of open up a mail application, or if it's on a phone, it'll take you to like Gmail, stuff like that. So what we can do is I can just say the kind of link is my email. But to kind of say this isn't a website, this is an email that we want to kind of make, we use this special bit at the beginning of the value. We still use href saying link to this, but we just use mail to : to say this is an email. And now when we update, when I click on my email, you can see I immediately opened up my mail application. I don't actually have it set up. If I did, it would open a new email with that email. at the top in the to box. So that's how we do those kinds of links. And we can see as we do these, it's quite easy to kind of use HTML. You just have to know, you just have to know how to do it, but then the syntax itself is not too difficult like this. We can even do, we'll copy this one last time, just to keep practicing. And instead of an email this time, we can actually link to something like a telephone. So I'm actually going to put the library phone in. This is what's going to show up on the page. We left the href blank, so this click won't do anything. But now we can do TEL : as in telephone, just like we did mail to : and then we can put in the line like this. We can update that. And now, obviously on a PC, I don't have the ability to make phone calls, so it's giving me this little box. But if I went to this website on my cell phone, as soon as I click that, it would probably initiate a call, or at least immediately give me the option to say, oh yeah, I want to call them. And you can see all of this kind of cool stuff we do with attributes like that. One last thing that we can do. I'm going to make a link and I'm going to say go to bottom of page like this. Doesn't do anything yet. How am I going to get it to the bottom of the page? Well, this is a link tag, so we can somehow link to the bottom of the page, I hope. So let's go all the way down to the page, the bottom of the page. I want to stay inside my body tag, and I should actually go back and mention that. The body tag is everything visible on the web page. So everything you see on the web page as someone going to that website, it's most likely in the body tag. And then this head tag, which we didn't even pay attention to at the beginning, is everything kind of invisible / metadata about that website itself. So this means like what encoding we use, like English alphabet. This describes like the window size, this title element. Actually, if we change it and then go to this page, we can see that's actually the title of the kind of tab up at the top. I changed it to my web page and it shows up at the top of the tab, just like that. And then this is some additional stuff we'll look at in CSS. So the head tag is all kind of hidden metadata stuff, and everything you do and see on the page goes in the body. So that aside, we'll go back to the bottom, just ahead of the close of the body. I'm just going to put bottom of the page. Well, how can we link to this? It doesn't have like a web address, but what we can do is use one additional attribute called an ID. And an ID is something unique. Each element can only have one ID, so I can't have multiple IDs on this one p tag. And each ID, so in this case, bottom, you can only have this once on the page. So it has to be unique both ways, like that. And now what I can do is I have this text at the bottom and I've given it some metadata that I'm going to use to link to. So I'm going to link to this ID. So once you have this at the bottom of the page, if you're following along, we can come back up to the top, go back to this empty link that I set up. And this time I'm going to use, instead of like tell and mail to, I'm going to use a hashtag. I'm going to update this. And now you can see when I click on bottom of page, it's pulling me all the way down like that. If this was, because it's at the bottom of the page, it can't kind of go up. But if I link to instead, let's put this link on this. So we'll call this bottom. And like I said, you can only have an ID once. So I have to take this out now just to see what happens. If I click on this, it kind of takes you to that element by that ID and kind of puts it at the top of the page. Let me minimize this a little bit and then we'll still be able to see it. So just like this, it takes it to the top of the page. So you can link to a section on the page using an ID attribute like this. So links can link to emails, outside websites, phones, sections on pages. And then obviously the last thing they can do is they can link to different web pages on the website. So right now we'll go ahead and actually make a second web page and see how we can navigate between the two. Let me open up my files. And what we need to do is go back and look at files. Like we said, each .html file is its own web page. So we actually need to make a second HTML file so that we can have its own content on it. So what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to add something called page 2. I'm going to put a little bin called page 2. And then I'm just going to call the HTML file itself just 2.html like this. And now we can see, just to kind of tidy up all my files, I'm going to say all the page 2 stuff is going to be in a box called page 2 like this. Unlike index.html, just give us a blank file. So what we can do, I'm going to copy this doctype.html, which you always need at the top of an HTML file. And that basically just tells Chrome, Mozilla, Edge, this is in fact an HTML file. So you always need that. I'm just going to copy this down to the head, go to 2, and I'm just going to paste this in. And then I can just add in my own empty body tag. And then I just have to keep in mind this HTML root element, which has to have every piece of HTML inside of it. So this is kind of the ultimate outside box that you nest things in. I didn't copy that, so I have to paste my own in like this, so it's closed the way that it should be. And then I'll just go ahead, go back to this invisible metadata, and I'll say, we'll call the title of this page 2. So instead of my web page, it'll say page 2. It's going to put a p tag in so we know when we see it on this side. I'm going to say websites page 2. When we click update, this update play button, it always updates and then goes back to kind of the home page, this index.html. So we can't actually see it yet. We have to set up the link to navigate to it, and then we'll set up a link to navigate back. So we can go back to index.html, that home page. I'm just going to put this at the top of the body again. I know it's getting a little messy, but you can delete examples as you want. But just at the top of the body, I'm going to make a couple new tags. And I'll explain what this is. This is a tag. The header tag has all kind of introductory content. In this case, I mean something like a new HTML element, a navigation section. If I play this, you can see I don't have any content in it, so it doesn't do anything yet. But this is kind of just metadata so that when people come to my website, they use accessibility tools, they can easily find the kind of navigation at the top of the website. And I mean something, you know, like these things we see at the top of websites, the navigation tools. I'll make a quick list to kind of put all my web pages in. I'll put 2 items because I'm just going to have 2 web pages. This is going to be home page, and this will be page 2. If I update that, we can see I have them up at the top. And now I just need to make these links. So I'll add some A tags like this. Oops, I need my Href attribute. And I'll space these out so we can see them. And now let me do the same with the second one, and then we'll put the actual web addresses in so we know what they look like. Okay, so with these 2 blank at the moment. So just a bit of new knowledge now. The index.html file, if you go to any website, the home page is always just kind of slash like this. If you go to any specific page, you kind of get this sub path in the web address, that thing at the end, which says which page it is. But the home page is always just blank like this. It doesn't say slash homepage. It just says the domain of the website itself, the thing ahead of the .com. So what we can do is we can just say slash. And with this one, just like we saw with that tech training website, we want to go to slash .to.html like this. If we play this, we can see this seems to be doing what it's supposed to, which is taking us back to the same page I'm on now. Just like that. But this one is a little broken. And it's broken even if I go to this page. So we didn't quite set it up the way that we should. And the reason that is because my 2.html file is inside its own little bin called page 2. So what I actually need to do is say, hey, I'm inside page 2, and then you'll find 2.html from the kind of main level. Right now, I'm kind of at this level. I can see index.html. I can see the page 2 bin, but I can't see its contents. I can see these two files. So when I tell Chrome to go to this website, I need to say, from my files, go find page 2, which you can see now. Look inside of that, and then you'll be able to see the 2.html that I'm specifying. So if I click on that, now when I click on that, it's going to find exactly what I want. And if we open this up, we can see I got my web address as Replit gives it. And if I click on page 2, it's going to say, okay, from the home page, I'm inside page 2, and then 2.html file. So that's kind of what that's doing. And that's how a website is built up. Kind of finding those files in the bin as you have them. This now we can just copy. And I'm just going to put them into my 2.html, because once I get to page 2, I want to be able to come back. So I can update that. And now I can easily navigate between the two like this. When I click on its own link, I just kind of stay on that page. But I can also jump back like this. Like that. So that's how we link to our own pages. We just kind of give what's called the path name. What am I inside my files? In this case, I put it in something called page 2. And then I do slash to say I'm now inside of that. And then I say what I want to find. So page 2, that box is 2.html. Okay. So next. So by the way, I know it's a lot of content and I may be typing fast, but the main point of the class is not to get caught too much in the details of specific things, but just to get used to writing elements, nesting things, getting used to the idea of attributes and things like that. So if it gets too complicated, just take a step back and just kind of pay attention to the general things. Okay, so now we have the ability to make a multi-page website. We can have as many pages as we want. And now let's see, kind of like one of the last main things. Oh, thanks, John. Is how do we load images onto a website? Like I said, from this home website, all of this is just text, just plain text in an HTML file. This blue description we now know can be described with HTML. Well, we will know once we get to CSS. But all of this is just text in a file, with the exception of the images, obviously. Those have to be image type files, not text type files. So in this website, we'll have text files and some website files, some image files. Okay, so we'll go ahead. Again, a little bit of a messy website, but just demonstration. I'm just going to put it at the top of my homepage, just below the body, so I don't have to keep navigating on this side. I just want to see my image on this page. This is going to be image tag. Just use a comment to say what I'm doing. And now an image tag is going to be a bit like, what happened to them? It's going to be a empty element like these guys. So what I have is I have img as an image, and then I can just close it. And that's all an image tag is. And everything else is inside as metadata, kind of like we did with these links. So let's quickly get an image into Replit. We kind of want to upload a file so that we can use it. So I have one on my desktop, but if you want, you can go quickly find any image on Google that you have. We just do it at the end of the class. I just want to upload a file. And again, we can just do that from these triple dots. Upload file. I have one on my desktop called logo. I want to put it into my file bin. And I actually want to make a specific place to put all my images. I don't want this to be one giant alphabetical mess. I kind of want to section off and tidy up my data. So I'm going to put logo, that image file, inside something called media, all my images and videos that I might have. So now I have my logo.png. You can have a JPEG if you want, into my files uploaded. And I'm going to come back to my image file. Unlike links, when I had an href, now I'm going to have an src attribute. And that's basically going to be the equivalent of an href. It's going to say, how am I going to go find this image? So unlike the link, when I put a web address, I'm going to put a file path. So I'm going to say, from media, go find logo.png. Hopefully that's good. We'll see in a second. A couple additional attributes that we could use. We have the alt attribute. This is also an accessibility thing and kind of a thing if you have any mistakes. If a website can't load an image, if it can't find it, it will show this alt text instead. So I'm going to say image of NFPL logo. Next, I'm going to describe a title attribute. And I'm just going to put NFPL logo again, and we'll see what this does in a second. And let's go ahead and see what comes out. Okay, so we have a totally massive image on this website. It just gave it its native size. You know, it's a high definition image, so it's quite huge. So at this moment, we could do a lot with this in CSS to kind of change the size of this and the layout. But even in HTML, we have a height attribute. And I'm just going to say 100 pixels in height. And then that cuts it way down. So that's good. You also have a width attribute. But as we can see, if I set both, it doesn't maintain aspect ratio. So if I do both of them, it does that. If I do just width, it's going to maintain aspect ratio, just like if I just did height alone. Let me do this actually. Okay, so that's not too bad. So we'll use width. So it's saying it's going to be 150 pixels wide, and then the height is going to be automatically adjusted to maintain its dimensions. If I put my mouse on top, we can see it says NFPL logo. That's the title that I gave it. So that just means when I put my mouse on top of it, it's a little bit of metadata that pops back up. We'll go ahead and I'm I'm going to indent my image. And what I'm going to do actually is open up an A tag, and then below it, below the image, I'll go ahead and close it. So now I have an element, a link element, kind of like, like a box. And then inside of that, I have my image. So what I'm doing is I'm making this whole image itself a link. I don't just have to make text a link. I can make image a link as well. So if I go to, we'll just use this website so we have something to go to. I'll say, okay, this link goes to this website, and that link's content is the image itself. So now if we click run, now we see when I put my mouse on top of the logo, I get the little hand symbol like that. And that means when I click it, if I click it like this, then I can get to that website. The reason it doesn't let me in this box because it wants to stay on replit.com. It doesn't like that I'm going outside Replit inside this little box. So that's why we have to go to the website itself. Let me take a look at this again. And then let me show you. So just like with the web page 2, when we had to do page 2/2 HTML, we saw I did the same thing. I said, from the spot that I am now, go inside media, and then you can find logo.png. If I take this out, it'll mean it won't be able to find it. And that's when this alt text comes in. If it can't find the image, if it can't load it, can't download it, that's when you get this. So it's kind of like an accessibility kind of bug tool, just kind of like a fallback, if you will. And the alt text is also what accessibility tools, people blind, having websites read aloud to them, that's what they get read instead of seeing the image itself. So it's always useful and crucial to include this alt text if you want to do like coding as a job or profession. Let me see. Yeah, if anyone needs to leave or anything, I will be, I do have this being videotaped, so I will send out the link to the class at the end. And I know we have 10 minutes left and the class is almost done.
This is good. The alt one option is good.
Yep.
Something good to remember. Yeah.
Yeah. Let me go back to my handout. This is it. I'm going to skip Fab Icon just for the sake of time.
Matt,
yeah.
One thing, because you talked about blind people reading.
Yeah.
Are you going to talk about M? Just so people know.
What is M? What do you mean?
The emphasis. So if somebody if they were blind and they wanted to read the page, M is a tag, EM.
Oh yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Yep. So yeah, I kind of skipped it. I had it in my notes. So let's go back to this a minute. So HTML is supposed to give meaning. That's what the tags do. Way in the beginning, we did the B and the I tag. That means a bullock in italicized, and that's kind of non-meaningful. That's just a visual cue. But the kind of the same effect of bold and italic is strong and emphasis. And if I use the strong tag, let me go ahead and do that actually. This is bold. This is strong. And if I do this, we can see they both come out visually bold, but this one is non-meaningful. It's just a little style that I kind of put on the page. But as Joanne said, if I put the strong tag on, which is a semantic HTML element, it's giving meaning that people can use. This might be something that people with accessibility tools will be, the accessibility tool will quickly, find that and emphasize that being read aloud. Okay, yeah, so I'm going to skip Fab Icon, but what a Fab Icon is, if you look at the top of my Chrome, you see we know how to do the title. We know how to set the title using the title tag in the head. But we can also set the little image next to it. You can see the Replit logo, the W3 Schools logo, Fab Icons, this logo. So I have the text in the handout, and what you can do is to set that logo, you just have to add an image into Replit like we've been doing. And then inside the head, you can just put it below title. You can just copy this exact line of code, basically, link relation equals icon, type equals fabicon.io, and href equals, in this case, it would be media / the name of the Fab Icon. I have a puzzle.png one that I was going to do, but I'm just going to skip it so we save time. And that will set this icon up in the top like that to help customize the website. And then the last little bit, this is again just a little bit of practice. Nothing new with this. We've seen HTML elements, we've seen attributes and nesting and why we use meaning. But this is just the last little bit of practice we'll do to really get an idea of nesting and all that. And we'll get into a little bit of CSS, AKA styling, which is the next class. How do we kind of spice up the page so it's not this drab black and white web page like this. So stick in my home page. I'm just going to move down all my content. So I'm at the top of the body so I can see it this way. And what we want to do is just build a little table like this. So we want to use some new elements. A lot of nesting we'll have to do, and it'll just get us used to using HTML again. So a table element, its tag name is just table. That's easy enough. Each row in the table just looks like this. It's just abbreviated like that. I'm going to open this up so I can put in some content to it. Say what it is. And then inside each table row like this, we need to put the actual cells of the table. So in this case, I'm describing, at the beginning of the table, I'm describing the headings across the top. So I'm going to use the TH element, and that is just kind of the heading in a table. So I'm going to do TH, close TH. I'm going to do a couple so I can have a sizable table. And then what do I want to do? We'll just be kind of meta about this. We'll just make the table about CSS, HTML, and JavaScript like this. We can see when I did it, it just looks like text on the page, even though I've designed this whole table setup. But that's okay, we'll keep going. Let's see what it looks like if we had a second row maybe. So now that I've done my headings, I actually want to do, instead of table heading, we have a kind of a second equivalent thing called TD, which is table data. And that's just going to be the same thing, a table cell, but it's just not a heading. And we'll say, let's build a little table like this. Now we can see I built a little table. It doesn't have like lines and stuff, which is again, HTML doesn't do that. It just describes what something is. CSS does the styling, and we'll add on styling in just a second. But I've made a table. This whole thing is my table. I'm going to put some space. Yeah, I'm going to put some space. Made a table. I kept this empty TH just so I can have a blank spot and I can have the same amount of cells in each row like that. And I'm just going to do one last section, some TDs. It's going to kind of fill up my table. You don't have to make it this big if you don't want. And I'll just put some dots in so I can see it since I don't have outlines on my table yet. So now we can see I have the shape of a table, but I don't have anything with it. So last thing in this class, which we'll finish up within 5 minutes, is we'll just talk about introduce CSS. So now we see HTML. It's only the content plus the kind of meaning behind it. So Chrome, when it makes this website, it knows this is a table, and it knows this is the headings, and it knows this is cells in the table. But the HTML doesn't say anything about styling that. So that's why it doesn't have like lines, and it doesn't look like a table. It just looks like a messy little bit of code. So CSS, what that does is it basically selects a specific element. So in this case, we could select the table, and then we can apply a style to it. And a style has two things. It has, what am I doing? Maybe like a background of blue. So we'll say background is what I'm doing. And then the second thing is the value. I'm choosing to apply a background to this table, and that value is going to be blue. So I select table, say what I'm going to do to it, and then say what that value is of what I'm going to do to it. So in this case, this is again one of the most common attributes which you can put on any element that you want. It's called a style attribute. And it's the most primitive way to style things, aka CSS. And what we can do is something like this. And you can just type what I type. We'll see how to make CSS in the next class. But like I said, I choose what I want to do, change the width, and then I give it a value. And then I can also do multiple things at once. So you can just type what I type. We'll know how to do this next time. And now if I go like that, we could see it did what we wanted. It changed the width, so it takes up 100% of the page, and it put a black box around the whole thing. But we still want lines between like each column and each row. So that suggests that we might have to put a style tag on each of these rows, maybe each table data itself. And that's why this style attribute, I said, is the most primitive, because you basically choose one single kind of element. It's a box. This table element is a box with table headings and all kinds of columns in it. And we basically slap a label on it that says this specific box, put a width on it, and put a solid black line around it. But as we can immediately see, the problem with that is we didn't select all that we wanted to. We didn't get the columns and the rows. So now it seems like we have to do this kind of same thing to who knows how many elements. Do we have to do each of these individually, copy and paste the same code again and again? Hopefully not. So what we can do is we can come up to the head, and instead of the style attribute, we'll use the style tag itself. And I'll say, so we can define CSS within this. And now you can see when I try to put a comment inside my style tag, it's not commenting out. And now that's because inside the style tag, I don't put HTML, I actually put CSS. So this is kind of a new language at this point. And this is a CSS comment. And we'll see this in the second class if you come back. But what I can do now is instead of putting a style attribute in table, I have to do three things when I kind of do this level of CSS. I have to choose, aka select what I want to style. So I'm just choosing table. So I'm going to say table. I'm going to use these squiggly brackets to say everything inside of this I'm applying to table. I could space this out if I want. And now I apply my CSS things just like this. So I could say width is 100. And I could do something like this. If I run it, it doesn't do anything. But now if I take this out, we could see that it still stays on the page. And that's because this is being applied to any table element on the page. It could be multiple tables. So we can see with this, we can apply and select multiple things at once, and then just apply the CSS, define it a single time. On that note, we can actually say, we want to define the cells in the table. So let's select table data and table heading. And we'll see how to use this syntax in the next class, but you can just copy along. I'm going to say, we can see what CSS is. It's kind of all the stuff that you use with like text editing tools, Microsoft. You can make things bold, make things blue, align text just like this. And now you can see when I just updated the page now, any TD element and any TH element on this web page is now going to get this styling applied to it. I only need to define it once, and this little bit is selecting it as many times as exists. So instead of doing a style tag on each of these individually and repeating myself a bunch, I'm going to use this page level style element to apply that. So that's why I wanted to show that, because almost no one uses this style attribute because it's so slow and it's monotonous to apply it to every single element at the element level. Instead, we can just go page level and select all that we want at once like this. Okay, I know we got 5 minutes past, so let me go ahead and the class is, the content is mostly done. We talked about CSS. I explained it a little bit in the handout, but we'll also go into the bulk of it next class if you come back. ID in class, we used ID once. That's basically a name that you can give an element, like a metadata name, so you can go back and find it. We use that with like that jump link to jump to the bottom of the page. And class is kind of like that, and we'll see that in CSS. It's kind of useless in HTML alone. It's something that CSS needs. Okay, yeah, the rest of it is, I wasn't going to explain too much in the class anyway, but you can go ahead and review this handout if you want. I have on the last page of the handout, the library website page that I made with some useful things in it. If you click on the web development button, you can see I got some stuff. If you go to HTML, you can find the W3 Schools website that we talked about in this class. You can find the HTML cheat sheet. And this explains, you can see this cool little website, lots of JavaScript happening. You can see this is all the elements that exist in HTML. Most of these you won't use. You might use like 10 main ones exclusively, and the rest you only use in uncommon cases. So don't panic when you see this huge list. But these websites you can go to review and go beyond what we did in this class. And I'll just end by mentioning, if you do want to come to the CSS class next week, just check that you signed up. If you did or you didn't and you can't come next week, you can sign up anyway. I will be videotaping it. So you can sign up and then just let me know to send out the video link again. And I'll send out the link to today's video as well.
Matt, one question, where is this handout? I probably missed in the beginning.
Yeah, the handout, it came in the email with the Zoom link. It should be in that.
Oh, okay, so I'll check that. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
You'll be able to send us this Replit, with a copy.
Yeah, I'll when I send out the link to the video, I'll include the link to this so you can come back and just see all the code that I made.
The only thing I would suggest to everybody is free code camp is really wonderful. I think W3 Schools is good.
Mm-hmm.
Free code camp is a really good program. And I would just suggest using your Google email. Don't create an account. Just use your Gmail.
Yeah, that's a good suggestion. That's a really good website. And you can find a ton of free websites that teach it, that let you code on the website, teach you specific things. So you can just like Google, HTML lessons and find anything you want. You can go to Free Code Camp, W3 Schools, lots of content to study.
Yeah, I found it. Sorry, I missed it. I did not scroll all the way down for the
Oh, that's okay.
PDF that you sent. Yeah.
Yep. Yeah, that's
Okay.
this exact thing. In this slideshow, I wasn't showing it the whole time, but it does have most of the code as I planned to type it. At least you can see we did most of this.
Right.
But I'll send out today's code that we did in class as well.
Yeah, that would be helpful. Thank you. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, Matt. And I'll be there in the next class. And enjoyed it. Thank you.
Yep. Thank you. Yeah. If you guys have any feedback, you can always email me too if you don't feel like chatting. Feel
Thanks
free to
so much.
leave. I see one question. How about video and audio files? Can we add those into the web page as well? Yeah, you can. I actually haven't done it because most of the time when I include a video on like a website, and this library website I made and I maintain it, actually, most of the time I put a video on it. It's actually a special link to a YouTube video. So I'm not like hosting the video, like uploading it like I would upload an image. But if you just Google HTML, how to, video element, especially with W3 schools, it's probably mostly the same thing. You upload a video and then you just use a little element to say, go find that video, just like you would go find an image. And then you might have a couple attributes like sizing the width of the video box and stuff. So yeah, you could do that. Okay, thank you all. If no last
Thank you.
questions, feel free to log off, but I'll stick around until you all leave in case anyone has anything.
Okay. Thank you, Matt. We'll see you next time.
Thank you, Sapna. Okay, I think that's it. Thank you.